punctuality. You see, I was even on time here today. How about that? It's
But-
carried through over 50-some years. And then learn to communicate. In this day and age, maybe you've had the same experience if you're trying to make reservations over the phone, and you get somebody on the other end of the line and they talk so fast and in an accent that you don't know, and you're wondering, well, what did I hear? You know, would you repeat that? And well, they repeat it, but you still don't know. And when I was in service, that didn't go at all, because, well, here, maybe what I should say is Uncle Sam put me in a field artillery unit, and I got a commission through the ROTC at the University of Illinois. And when you go on to the advanced ROTC, you agree, when you get commissioned, you agree to at least 2 years in active duty. So I went into service then as an officer, and so then you're expected to do certain things as a commissioned officer. Well, my training was in the ROTC was mostly in anti-aircraft artillery that shot at airplanes. In Uncle Sam's wisdom, he put me in a field artillery unit with a 105 millimeter howitzers. I could show you some pictures. Would that be helpful?
That'd be very helpful.
I didn't take a lot of photographs, but I was able to find a few. And here, there's little captions underneath. That's me in a Class A uniform.
Good.
Let's see, some of that, well, that was at Fort Carson, Colorado. I was out there briefly, and then our whole unit was transferred to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Here I am training what's called a fire direction crew. And the one at the bottom is not very impressive, but it's an optical device that permits one to point a big gun in a very precise direction. And here are pictures of the guns that we were using. They're 105 millimeter howitzers. And for scale, you can see the guys standing up there, and one of them has a he's got a projectile there. You see the thing is about that long. And then sometimes down at Fort Sill, because that was, at that time, the artillery center, which meant that they conducted courses to train artillerymen, both commissioned officers and non-commissioned officers, for all the other units. Well, they had to be impressive, and on occasion they would have a demonstration shoot. You see how they're all lined up there, one right after the other? You could drive for a mile, and there was just one gun right after the other, and then another shot of them. They had just fired around. Can you imagine what the noise would be with about a mile full of howitzers all going off at the same time? It's pretty impressive.
That sounds pretty cool.
That was a type of unit that I found myself, and well, you could see how when you're dealing with guns and live ammunition, there's no room for mistakes. And yeah, you had to be responsible. And when I put on there for accuracy, in today's world, so many times I feel that accidents happen because everyone feels, well, that was the first mistake. I mean, even people committing crimes. Well, you know, we'll slap him on the wrist, we won't penalize that person, because that was his first mistake, and everyone gets a second mistake. In the Army unit where I was, there was no room for a mistake. They operated on what they called 0 defects. So every time the gun went off, it was intended to go in the direction and the distance that it was supposed to go, which left no room for, well, yeah, we shot that round out of bounds, but that was only the first one. You know, we're going to do better. No, the Army didn't do that way, and so I put on their accuracy and communication, because with every round there were orders that were sent down to the gun as far as the azimuth was concerned, and the elevation determined the distance that the gun would shoot. And again, accuracy, communication the first time, fast, all that was part of my duties. Okay, I got something else that might contribute a little bit. I don't know what ideas people have of the breakdown or the subdivisions of Army units. Division, regiment, battalion, company, battery, those
Not
mean
really
anything?
taught. No.
Okay, well
Just
let me,
more like this battalion was like.
let me go back just a little bit. And again, I'm talking from 1953, 4 and 5, when I was on the patrol. I think it's all changed now. But when I was in service, the Army had a basic unit called a division. There were infantry divisions and armored divisions, but a division was anywhere from 10,000 to 12,000, maybe even more soldiers in a unit. And the division, the first major subdivisions of a division were regiments. And typically there were 3 regiments to the division. Each regiment was broken down into battalions, going down into smaller and smaller units. Typically 5 battalions in a regiment. Within the battalion, there were companies. An infantry company had roughly 200 soldiers in it. The company was broken down into platoons and squads, and so that was the subdivisions. The artillery, instead of having companies of about 200 men, the artillery called them batteries. So a battery and a company were the same. And I was in Baker Battery of the 537th Field Artillery Battalion. Oh, I don't know. This was my service record. Up here someplace it says artillery, and in fact, you might even, yeah, Fort Sill, that's where most of this took place. And as you can see, I was in Baker Battery 537th. My total time in service was 6.5 years. I was in the reserves for a while, along with now, this I don't think you can do anything about, but this is what our battery looked like. There was a battery commander who was a captain. Immediately below him was an executive officer. Now, the substance was really here. There were 6 of those howitzers, and each one had a section and a driver and a 2.5 gun truck and so forth. And they went together with the guys who plotted the data. That was the Fire Direction Center. I'm training them right here. And of course, miles away, there had to be a forward observer who tried to direct where the round was landing onto the target. And then, because maps were not always available, sometimes we had to do our own surveying in order to have a chart of some sort. And so this part of the battery was called the firing battery. And the executive officer, that was me, was directly in charge of this. Now, there was more to the whole battery, and these are self-explanatory, I guess. There was a mess hall because they had to eat, and a communication section with radios and telephones. There was a motor pool and a supply room. But by and large, this was where the action was. And that roughly was 200 GIs. This was me, and this was my direct responsibility right there. I don't know, does that
That's pretty interesting.
describe it?
Yeah, it's pretty good. So you were
Okay.
in charge of a group of about 200 men that operated the howitzers.
Yes.
The howitzers, could you just explain them a little more in case?
Well, to most people, they would say, well, is that a cannon? Yes, in a way. The guns were subdivided according to their mission, really. And a howitzer is a gun that has a fairly short barrel, because in shooting it tends to lob a shell high onto a target. The short barrel says the muzzle velocity will not be real high. Now, if the barrel is extended, then the muzzle velocity goes up and the round goes straight. And those were not called howitzers. Those were real cannons and guns. For example, in the anti-aircraft, they had extremely long barrels because they're going to shoot 30,000 feet up into the air, so that had to have a very high muzzle velocity. So anyhow, the howitzer was a type of gun, had a short barrel, and tended to lob the shell. But even this little thing would
shoot
go
pretty
9
far.
miles. Now, most of the time, we didn't shoot quite that far, but even 4, 5, 6 miles.
It's pretty impressive on one target.
You had to have somebody out there observing, because you certainly aren't able to see the target from where you are. I did have someone recently when they learned that I had been part of the 537 Field Artillery, and they asked too, well, what is a 105 howitzer? And so I told her, and she said, oh, he said, did you actually shoot it? And I thought, no, don't make a wise comment, because at Fort Sill, since it was the artillery school, our primary reason for being there was to support the school. And they had a zillion different types of courses. And I can remember, on one day, out of the 6 guns, we only went out to the field with 2 of them. That's all that the school required. So we had 2 guns. We were supporting one of the classes of this, and those 2 guns fired 800 rounds. So if you want to go and divide 8 hours into 800 rounds, 2 guns, between 1 and 2 minutes, everyone was going off. And so the person that said, did you actually shoot it? I thought, oh. We're coming from entirely different directions. Oh, go ahead. Did I answer?
That was pretty good.
Okay.
So as executive officer of this battery, what were some of your responsibilities for your peers or people under you?
Oh, well, all the training of those of the guys, you saw them there on the guns, my responsibility.
So you were like a teacher for them, pretty much? You would teach them
every-
the ropes of the...
Every day. And sometimes in regular classes, sometimes just right out, we had, it was called a gun park, where when we weren't in the field, the guns were kept in this gun park, and they were down there cleaning them, lubricating them. Well, I was there too, asking questions, instructing, what do you do this, and so on, and so on, and so forth. So the training of all those guys, rest directly, I mean, the buck stops someplace. And in the artillery battery, the buck stopped with the executive officer.
How long were you in Colorado for?
In Colorado, we were only there about 3 months.
So most of this was done at Fort Sill?
Almost all of it at Fort Sill, yes. As a matter of fact, I was responsible for the whole battery in moving from Carson to Sill because my battery commander's wife was pregnant, and he went down early because he didn't want to get caught. Captain Walter Larson, yeah, he had just come back from Korea, and well, within a year he had come back.
So were you able to stay in touch with your family when you were at Fort Sill?
I got married while I was at Fort Sill, so yeah, that was an important time, and sure, my folks lived in a little town of Mount Olive, Illinois. People wonder, where in the world is Mount Olive? It's about halfway between Springfield and St. Louis, right on Interstate 55. So 2,400 people. In my graduating class, there were 38.
Pretty small.
But regardless, we were able to get into universities at that time. I don't know whether you noticed.
Doctor, it's pretty impressive.
The last 25 years of my professional life, I taught geology and earth science at Northeastern Illinois University.
So after you were at Fort Sill, you went on to, but you had already gone to grad school before.
Yeah, I was actually on active duty between master's degree and PhD. I really wanted to finish, but Uncle Sam said, there's a Korean War going on, we need you. And it was just luck that I was sent to this unit that went to the artillery school, because most everybody else went over to Korea. I had no clout, it was just the luck of the draw that I went to a place where I stuck.
Do you feel that your military background helped you when you became a teacher?
Yes.
In what ways?
Well, first of all, in teaching these GIs, you're dealing with a very wide spectrum of capacities. We had some guys who couldn't hardly write their name. The draft was going on, and so they were draftees, and most of them came from Louisiana, Arkansas, and East Texas, that part of the world. And yeah, they just didn't have much in the way of education, and so in order to teach them something, it's a whole lot different than if you have someone with AGC tests, with big scores. I mean, that wasn't true at all. Well, when you get along, I mean, Northeastern is still supposed to be a university, but some of our students over there, one would be surprised that they have made it out of high school someplace. So you have to understand your student and try then and not talk too high over their heads because you put them to sleep in a hurry otherwise, and nothing happens in the way of education. And yeah, I had the same thing to deal with in service.
And how long after you left Fort Sill did you pursue your career as a teacher? You got your doctorate degree right after?
Yeah. We got out of service, and both my wife and I went back to Champaign. She got her master's degree, and I got a PhD. And I went to work for a major oil company. back in Oklahoma. Today, we know that company is Exxon. And after 3 years with them, we moved back to Illinois. Our parents had some health issues, and I worked for a small mining company, the name of American Colloid Company. They produce clay products of all things. Within geology, my major area was clay mineralogy. People used to kid me. They said, "What? And make better mud pies?" But no, there was more to it than that. And I worked for 8 years with the mining company. So I had 11 years in industry, in the private sector. And then I went to Northeastern and taught for 25. So I had 36 years totally working as a geologist.
Do you attend any reunions for the Fort Sill for your battery, or?
I wish we had, but unfortunately, this unit, right after the Korean War, it was deactivated. I did find that out on the internet. The 537th had quite a history, though. It was in France in World War I, and it went back in World War II. It was an anti-aircraft unit. It was part of the 90th Infantry Division. And then after the war, they came back, and then, well, it was a Carson and then Fort Sill. But then when the Korean War kind of calmed down, it was deactivated. And so I wish I could have gone to reunions, but I'm a member of the American Legion, and we get a monthly magazine. I don't know if you folks attend any of the services that we have at Veterans Day and Memorial Day, but anyhow, you probably saw me with one of the rifles, well, anyhow.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war, about the military in general? I think there are a lot of young people that come out of high school that would do well to go into service for 2 years. There are a number of countries around the world that have that. You tend to mature. You tend to grow up a little bit. You tend to know a little bit more about what you want to do when you have the opportunity to do it. My first years at Champaign-Urbana was 1948, and we still had a lot of World War II veterans there. And these fellas, you know, they had been in service, and now they had the GI Bill, but they had their head screwed on straight, and they knew what they wanted. And even guys like Brokaw wrote a book called The Greatest Generation, of those people who came back and they got a degree and they wanted a family, they got married, they got a house, and I think today, without that maturing, and the discipline, that's another one there. You know, what you have to do now, and then this, and then this, and then this. This is the day that everybody is so casual. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, maybe I'll do that some other time. Well, that doesn't serve you well down the road. So, in answer to your question, I haven't changed in that respect. As a matter of fact, if you check these dates on here, you'll see that, I think it's on here. Yeah, find it. But anyhow, I started in the reserves in 1948.
Right, did anyone else do that?
Well, I can't put my finger on it,
Ah.
but right out of high school, I joined the organized reserves and went to meetings, and every summer there was a summer camp, and I don't see anything wrong with it. And so that was in 1948. Today, I haven't changed my mind.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about your experience? Anything I haven't really covered?
I don't know, do you have any other questions?
Not really. You did pretty good with your explanation of things.
Oh, well, thank you.
All right, I think that concludes it.